So this is my first video on my YouTube channel that I made as a replacement really for my Substack, so that I don't really have to write anymore, because I hate writing. So it's easy to just speak all my articles. So this one is going to be a reiteration of one of my earlier ones, just a quick video. I made an article some months ago explaining that I think that verbal ability is not a true type of intelligence. And I use the WACE-4 IQ test as an example here, which is pretty much considered the gold standard IQ test. And on the WACE-4 you have verbal ability, VCI, which is verbal comprehension index. You have PSI, which is processing speed index. You have working memory index. You have PRI, which is perception or whatever. And perception contains some reasoning ability tests and also some spatial ability tests, like block design or visual puzzles. So you get 4 different indexes, and you can look up how well people do on those indexes at different ages. And we see that PRI, WMI and PSI, all those indexes peak at around 18 to 20 years of age. So people who are around 20 years old on average score the highest. You score the highest on those indexes when you're around 20 on average, which is exactly what you would expect. That should be when intelligence peaks, really. The brain is fully developed, but you're still young and healthy. So that really should be when intelligence is peaking. So that makes sense for those indexes. The problem is with VCI, which peaks around, it was like 50 to 55 or something ridiculous. Not even close to 20. And that doesn't really make sense from an intelligence point of view. The brain, it doesn't deteriorate like the body, I guess, but it should not really be at its best. It shouldn't be functioning the quickest, the most efficiently at 55. You could argue maybe like 30, because it's had time to optimize its neural pathways or whatever, but you can't argue 50 to 55. That's ridiculous. So verbal ability is the odd one out, which makes me think that, as I suspected, that it's not really a true type of intelligence, and it's really just a skill. It's really just a skill it's a skill we practice every day. And obviously the more you practice it, the better you get, which is why older people do better, because they've had more time to practice it. And I have a hypothetical situation here to help explain. So let's say you have a friend, and this friend is going to take the IQ test, and you don't know how intelligent they are. You don't know what their verbal ability is like. But let's say you know that they have a good memory. You know that they have a good memory, and you know that they have an interest in words. They like words, they like talking or reading, whatever. seems to me that you could pretty much guarantee that this person is going to have a good vocabulary score. There are 3 main verbal tests in the WACE, and then there's 1 or 2 extra tests. So they have a vocabulary test. This person's going to do well in that. They have a general knowledge test. This person's going to do well in that because they have a good memory. There's a similarities test. This person should do reasonably well in that. And there's also the reading comprehension extra subtest. And again, they should do reasonably well in that. And you can predict that based purely on their memory and their motivation. Just had to pause the video. Can't quite remember where I left off, but I want to use an allegory here and say that verbal ability is like driving. They are both skills. Being good with words is like being good at driving. And taking a driving test, a basic driving test, is similar to taking a basic verbal test because we practice both of those things every day. Most of us drive every day and we use words every day. And so because of that, verbal ability tests have very good reliability, very high G loading, because we practice it every day. There's not a lot you can do to prepare for the tests, so it's not vulnerable to the practice effect. Has a good retest reliability, has a good indicator of your intellectual engagement, which has a high correlation with intelligence. So it's a good indication of how much you read and your ability to retain general knowledge and stuff like that. Because we practice it every day. And driving and verbal ability are both skills that are dependent on other forms of intelligence, as well as your motivation and your circumstance. So driving is based on spatial ability more than any other form of intelligence. It's based on spatial ability, your coordination, your vision, your visual processing speed, your movement tracking, your ability to predict and manipulate objects in space is very much a spatial ability skill, which is why men are better than women at driving. Men get in more crashes because we're more reckless and we take more risks, but men are better than women at driving, which is why all the Formula 1 drivers are men, even though it's not a sport that requires strength and testosterone, really. It's just men are better at spatial ability, so men are better drivers. So driving is based on spatial ability, as well as how much you can drive, how much you need to drive, how much you enjoy driving. And verbal ability, VCI, is based on memory more than any other type of intelligence. If you have a good memory, you are going to have good general knowledge and good vocabulary pretty much no matter what. As well as your motivation, how much you enjoy using words, how much you enjoy talking, socializing, reading, and I guess your occupation, if you're a journalist or whatever, you're going to be better than someone who's, I don't know, an engineer or a construction worker or something, based purely on how much you need to use words. With driving, if you work from home, you don't need to drive as much, and you're not going to be as good as someone who needs to drive every day. On average, people are generally going to be the same, but if you work from home, you're not going to be as good at driving. Likewise, people who are not interested in talking, like if you have autism, they're going to score lower on average, even if their overall intelligence is the same. So, in conclusion, I think that verbal ability tests can be useful for an estimation of IQ for most people, but not very high IQ people, probably not very low IQ people, and definitely not for people with an above average amount of autistic traits. I don't think it should be included in a full-scale IQ test because it will drag down people who have no interest in words. It will drag down people who don't have a good memory. It's basically a second memory test, really. They already have the working memory, and they do another memory test. And it also inflates the score of other people who do have an interest in words. So I think it's stupid, it shouldn't be included. It's not necessary because it's clearly not a true type of intelligence, and it's just a skill, so it's not necessary, and it also can adversely affect scores, so I think they should just leave it out. It's stupid.